Charles.
Yes,
welcome
sir.
to the first day of trying to resolve some of the technical problems. Actually, it's the second day. Phase 1 went into effect last night. But Charles, do you feel furious?
Because we're faster?
Exactly. The audience is probably going to not notice a difference on this show today, but what's happened is since yesterday, Charles, I've undergone an installation of fiber optic technology that now has a 40 times speed improvement from where we were yesterday, strictly speaking about, network bandwidth, how the videos get sent from here out to the viewers. So I think I've mentioned to you that I've, the first couple weeks of 2020, I was very focused on improving the image quality, the sound quality, and implementing our new podcast, which unfortunately right now is not live, but will be available shortly after this show. And now what I've done in the second month of 2020 is to focus on trying to stamp out the source of some of the problems. So hopefully today our audio will be very clean and there should be no buffering problems or anything like that. And this is part of the ongoing effort to continually improve Crowdsource the Truth.
Very well done, Jason, and thank you for that. And thanks for the magnificent poster here, which I'm sure is going to go down as one of the classics of the collection.
Yeah.
It's really something. I mean, I don't know where the art department comes up with these faces, but...
Right. Well, the faces are the faces of the bold and maybe not so beautiful, but these are the delinquent Democrats, the candidates for president. I never saw this movie, Magic Mike, but it seems, Charles, all you need is a couple of $1 billion and you can wave your wand and then abracadabra, your presidential candidate.
Yeah, and I do think that, Mike Bloomberg is, we're going to talk at length about this in the show today, I think that he is underestimating the degree to which he's about to be bitch slapped around the world. It's one thing to be somebody who is accomplished but modest about his or her accomplishments, and it's another thing to be the kind of person who has to let you know at every moment that he's wealthier or he or she is wealthier and smarter and you don't get it, and you're obviously, if you're lucky, you're in the C list, forget about the B list. And that's unfortunately for Mike, that's the way he behaves. And he has every reason to be proud of his business career. I mean, he really has built something. And the Democrats are now going after him from the left. I mean, somebody said that Mike Bloomberg, I believe, made more money getting fired from Salomon Brothers, $10 million, than most people make over the course of their whole lives.
Wow.
And that is true. I mean, now he was working at Salomon. He was a partner when the firm was very profitable, and he did perform a very important function at the firm, and that is the creating the systems required to analyze the mass amount of data that an investment bank does produce on a nanosecond by nanosecond basis. So, I mean, he really has accomplished in financial terms a tremendous amount. And when you do that, particularly when you step all over people, as he apparently may have done literally at his own firm, you create a lot of enemies. And those enemies look there and they say, well, wait a minute, this guy is maybe going to be the person who can, decide to drone strike me or anybody else. Maybe he shouldn't be president of the United States. So he's had a bit of a free ride, frankly, in the whole primary process, not bothering to debate until now, not bothering really to campaign, having in Bloomberg News, which before Mike made this decision, was truly a formidable news operation that did a lot of excellent reporting. But the second you tell reporters that you're going to cover the 2020 election, you just can't do any negative stories or ask any tough questions about my candidacy. I mean, it's like,
seems fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, Trump should have put Bloomberg News on the list. He put the 5 Chinese propaganda companies, of which I'd been on one of their shows many times. And quite frankly, I found in going on, it was then called CCTV, I found that they were remarkably open, in fact, more open than mainstream US television, letting me go on air and say whatever I wanted, including stuff that was pretty sharply critical at times of China or other countries. So,
did they serve you bat soup, Charles?
no, and I'm the kind of person who's like, don't even try that crap.
Have you seen the bat soup?
Have I seen? I don't think so.
It's like a bat.
You mean it's like an actual? It's not like bat flavored soup. It's a bat carcass in the soup.
Oh, I think it's both of those things.
Oh,
I can't
God.
believe you haven't seen it. It's
Oh,
absolutely
God.
outrageous.
Is that bat soup or rat soup?
This is bat soup.
How can you be sure?
Well, I mean, look at it.
I mean, yeah, what could go wrong trying to eat that? I mean, you've got to be nuts.
Yeah, and this is coming from somebody who's chilling at McDonald's.
Yeah, I don't knowingly eat any rats at McDonald's.
McBat.
Or McRat, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that just looks terrible. There's nothing, the face almost looks like a dog.
Bats have souls too. I mean, that's
and
just,
the fingers, look at the fingers. It almost looks like...
yeah.
Who would eat this, Charles?
I just imagine the Department of whatever it is, health in China, I'm sure has extensive regulations that are rigorously enforced on the care and cleaning of bat carcasses before they go into a soup. I mean, this is, honestly, I'm sure people will look askance at some of the food that we in America eat, but I mean, that's out there.
It seems terrible, and I like the idea that the Department of whatever is overseeing the bat regulations over there. There's a lot of weird stuff you can get into eating if you go to China and places like that, but we won't be having that today.
No, we won't, or ever, knowingly. So anyway, with that, maybe we should jump into the slides, because I know we're on the tight.
One more quick,
Sure.
brief thing. There's another upgrade that I've made to improve the streaming quality between cameras here in the room. So hopefully this should be a very smooth broadcast today, Charles.
Great. Smooth and easy listening.
Yes. Well, the audio quality is hopefully better. I think I've solved that clicking problem, and it's always something over here, Charles.
Well done, Jason. Well, so when it gets to the subject of Michael Bloomberg, I have to say that of the various major media operations that were most helpful to me when it came time to try to expose General Electric, it was by far and away the case that Bloomberg was amazing. I mean, they really were extremely professional, reviewing all the work that I'd done. They sent it out to a former head of the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, and some very famous people, and vetted it, took their time. They then let me go on air at a pivotal moment during the financial crisis when AIG, the day that AIG, American International Group, was seized by the government.
Whatever happened with AIG? We haven't heard too much about that.
I think they're in a battle back and forth as to whether the seizure was lawful. I have to go look at it. I haven't looked recently, but they were very nice to let me go on. And of course, in the middle of the financial crisis, if you go on primetime television and say, forget about AIG, that's a minor problem compared to General Electric, and General Electric's a big advertiser, you can imagine the reaction that GE had.
Doesn't go over well.
It did not go over well, but to the great credit of the Bloomberg News team, they said, look, the guy's right. We stick by him. And fortunately, the work was correct, and I was proven correct. And so I've got a lot of good things to say about most Bloomberg reporters. They do excellent work when it comes to financial analysis. But when you come to the political side of life, that's soft analysis. I mean, who really knows which political opinions are right or wrong? And you say the word political, and the talking heads act as if that's a form of higher learning. It's just, logic, or in most cases, nonsense.
There's a new restaurant opening in the West Village, Big Gay Bat Soup. It's going to be a hit.
Yeah, I won't be going there. But anyway, but Mike's business is very simple. If you take a step back, the core of the business is convincing the people who have the kind of money where this is a rounding error to spend today $20,000 a year on a machine that offers you
You're talking about the Bloomberg data terminal.
Well, that's the core of their business. So,
I don't know if a lot of people know about that, though.
So it's
before the internet, they were giving you stock information and stuff on the computer.
Yeah, and then with the internet, even more, and then their analytical power is highly advanced. So you can get a lot of stuff on that terminal very quickly, a lot of news, a lot of research. And so when you think about, when I started back in the antediluvian pre-flood period, where people didn't use computers, I mean, we had, at the first firm I worked, Dillon Reed, we had a library, our own in-house library that cost a lot of money, because you had to pay for all these subscription services, and you had to have a librarian and a staff and space and all that kind of stuff. So when you compare the cost of that with the cost of just paying $20,000 a year for a terminal that people can share, or if you're really rich, a whole bunch of people have their own terminals, it begins to make some sense. Then it becomes a status symbol. Are you powerful enough in your large bank that somebody else owns to have your own Bloomberg terminal, and you get this institutional stickiness where it's, you don't want to give it up. And so last I checked, which is years ago, the total number of terminals that Bloomberg had around the world was on the order of 320,000, which is not that many.
And aren't you paying like
$20,000 a year?
Oh, so it's not that many, 300,000.
Well, not really. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. So
but how many did they have at the height?
I don't know that issue, but what I'm saying to you is his idea in Bloomberg was not a mass market approach. It was to link up to the richest, most liquid people around the world, and then first sell them the terminal, but then interact with them in other ways to get other additional fees. And he was able to get it all financed on a basis where I think there are very few outside shareholders. Initially, I believe he teamed up with Merrill Lynch, a big investment bank, to get traction on the project and buy-in from other potential clients. And then he was able, I think, to buy Merrill Lynch out when Merrill Lynch got in trouble. So he has accomplished a masterstroke in building up his media empire. And you got to give him credit for that. It's not easy to do. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more people worth $62 billion from nothing. So that's impressive. But you could take a step back and say, well, wait a minute. That sounds also an awful lot like a monopoly. I mean, is it possible for anybody else to compete with Bloomberg in the same way? And should the government be looking at whether this was and is a monopoly? And if so, should there be something done about it? So the decision to run now in the way that he's doing it, literally buying the Democratic nomination,
pretty bad,
is horrible. I mean, I'd understand it if he were trying to do it on the Republican side, but it creates enormous difficulties for the Democratic side, because the Democrats, some argue the richest people are Democrats, but the appeal of the Democratic Party is supposed to be, populist, that markets need to be more regulated, rich people need to be taxed. That's kind of the Democratic brand, to say, okay, well, I'm going to let this guy who has countless residences and countless expensive office buildings around the world where all of his businesses are, and countless jets and helicopters and cars and all. And it's just one guy with 2 daughters, I think, and a girlfriend. This guy is going to get up on a pedestal, literally, and spout off about climate change.
Yeah, well, he needs an Apple box or whatever it is that he requested even get to the pedestal.
He's not the most sympathetic creature, right? I mean,
he's a jerk a lot. Like, I've been looking at videos of him,
right?
And he's just always like, no, why? Your religion, my religion, whose religion? And he's just like very quick to be a jerk.
He's kind of like an unpleasant Danny DeVito, with much more money. But so you look at this guy, and you have to give him, he knows how to make a buck, and hats off to him. And he really, the business model that he came up with and executed is extremely clever. In addition, he has a lot of experience with charity. So he can't say that he didn't understand the rules, and he doesn't understand philanthropy. He's got a goddamn charity called Bloomberg Philanthropies. And he's been involved with these Clinton grifter fraudsters in a mutual, in theory, charitable endeavor since 2010, certainly, and possibly beforehand. And we're going to take people through
Chapter and verse.
Chapter and verse again on this. We warned last episode that this would be something that ultimately would sink Mike Bloomberg. And the reason I'm so confident in saying it that way is that he has to not only secure the Democrat nomination, but he has to make sure that the voters who didn't come out for the sourpuss Hillary Clinton are going to come out for sourpuss Mike Bloomberg after he steals the election from sourpuss Bernie Sanders. He steals the nomination for sourpuss Bernie Sanders again. You know, that's not an easy, even if Donald Trump were, let's say, an easier person to beat, the mission of hurting those stray cats, you know, centrist Democrats, feminist Hillary lovers, wacko bird Bernie lovers today, you know, you're going to get behind, you're going to invest energy to come out of your basement, parents' basement, to vote for a guy who now says he won't release his medical records.
Yeah,
who just had a heart attack. I mean, you know, it's like,
I mean, that's like Trump didn't release his tax records, and then when Rachel Maddow got him, she was like, "Oh, we made a lot of money."
Yeah,
we know that. We don't need to see the tax records.
That's why.
Speaking of stray cats, Charles, well, this has more to do with bats, but Kat is in the comments telling us that bats are adorable but not edible.
Yeah, well, there's a shocker.
I mean, anything is edible. Its effect on your health is another question.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Chinese food. Actually, I like Chinese food. I don't go to the adventurous stuff. I mean, I've had snake soup once in Hong Kong, and I'll never forget. I was at quite a nice place with a Canadian friend of mine and a team of people. We were out celebrating, and we went to this super exclusive place, and the guy wasn't listening, and they just said, "You've got to have our specialties." Oh, sure. You know,
snake soup.
We didn't know it was snake soup, but it was, you know, it was a little dark. There's like reddish stuff in it.
Was there a snake in the soup?
No, but the point is, they had, I think, cut the snake and spilled some snake blood into the soup and this and that, and he was well into. He's hungry. He's well into it. He's, you know.
Chinese food has an element of magic to it.
Right, like and Magic Mike. Yeah, and so he's sitting there quaffing this soup, and then somebody says, "Hey, you know, I won't say the guy's name, you know, but you know, you're eating snake soup." And it was like, you know, out of one of those comedy routines.
Spit it all over everybody.
He tried to do that, but his face just went beet red. He went running to the men's room. You know, you could hear sounds of throwing up, and then he comes back out, and he's pale as a ghost. And he's like, "I gotta go to the hotel, man."
Wow, that seems like a psychological effect, because if he was eating this, I ate a whole snake one time.
And see, you've never been the same.
Well, it was not a whole snake; it was rattlesnake.
Oh, that's
in like Arizona or something, and it came in they like took a section of not the spine, but like the whole bones of the snake, and it was like chopped up, fried little pieces of snake in there.
God,
tasted good. Tastes like scallops.
I don't like yogurt, let alone kombucha. I'm not going to try a snake knowingly, but I do like steaks. That I like.
What about snake yogurt? Not
going to happen. Anyway, so on this narrow issue of Mike, and we're bringing Mike up today because in hours he's going to be you know, on the same stage as other ne'er-do-wells attempting to become the nominee for the Democrat Party. In the past, elitists, and going way back in the very beginning, obviously it was mostly elitists who became president of the United States, but in the more recent past, you have had elitists win. You had Roosevelt was certainly an elitist. You know, his estate is still there in Hyde Park, New York, and it is quite opulent, right on the river, et cetera. And certainly Bush 1 and 2 were elitists, even though 2 tried to pretend he wasn't. And I would argue even Obama is elitist, especially elitist. But, you know, generally speaking, for that show to work, you've got to exude empathy and caring, and you've got to, you know, be able to have winning ways, and you can't be you know, let everybody know that you really think that they're quite stupid, and because they're not half as rich as you are. I mean, and that's kind of the way Mike comes across. And I don't think, I mean, I know in New York he was able to get away with being a New Yorker, even though he's not from New York.
Sorry, I'm just reading the comments, and Spanman is telling us in Saigon, he's a Vietnam veteran. In Saigon, they would bring a cobra to the table, and they kept the thing cold in the refrigerator so that it was sort of lethargic, and then they would bleed it out and stir fry it. That sounds like cruelty.
Well, there's no, I mean, any
What does
animal.
that taste like? How good could that be?
I think next stop Saigon for you, Jason, you can find out. Good morning, Vietnam. You can have it for breakfast. But
I did try alligator in Louisiana and also turtle soup.
I mean, you've got, I don't know, you're an adventurous eater. What can I say? So, and I'm not. I've tried ham and Swiss as opposed to ham in America.
That's wild.
Anyway, so Mike, though, he doesn't really do well in these informal, unrehearsed, meet and greet style sessions. I mean, as mayor, he was in an element here. I mean, go to a New York City deli, a real one, and just get to the front of the line and sit there and say, well, I don't know what I'm going to have. I think I might have this, and see how you're treated. I mean, New York is a place with rough customers. So the gruff Mike Bloomberg, and that's okay here. But that does not play across America, and he doesn't seem to have the skill set that you need to unite a party that he has been in for fewer years than he was a Republican. Right. I mean, it's a very, and I don't think he needs my advice, but I'll give it to him anyway. I mean, unless what you really want to do is just burn all your money, which wouldn't help climate change too much. I'd give up right now. I mean, I'd see how this works tonight.
It's the best political advice for Mike Bloomberg is give up right now. All right, we'll do that.
Seriously. I mean, I think it's not going to go well tonight. It just isn't at the debate.
It's going to be a bloodbath.
And
the reason bloodbath.
Exactly, cobra blood, bat blood actually, bat shit.
Right.
Thinking of Biden, but anyway. And the reason for all this has to do, we brought this up in the past with this Clinton Climate Initiative and something called C40. And I'll give it to the globalists. They're great with slogans. Republicans, conservatives, they don't not so good. They don't have a very good slogan department. But these globalists, they can come up with stuff, and it sounds. You mean you're not in C40? What's C40? You don't know what C40 is? It's like it sounds like it should be something. And as we'll get into in a second, it's actually what is technically called a formless aggregation. It was never lawfully organized anywhere, but right away, all these mayors got together and said, oh, C40, a conference? I'm in. Let's go to some conference. The more the merrier. So with that, Jason, we could jump through the...
Niles is banking on Joe Biden doing push-ups.
Listen, Fat.
Instead of a debate, it's going to be an arm wrestling competition.
Yeah, it could be like the old-fashioned Miss America pageant. You have the swimsuit competition.
That would be good.
No,
presidential debates with the swimsuit competition.
Could have some fun. Well, anyway, this approach here, for those who are new, and I know every broadcast you get new viewers and hopefully new subscribers and supporters. The approach we take here for the newbies is that this is an attempt to do things on a podcast that you can't do in mainstream media, in the sense that we don't go surface level into topics. We try to take this enormous concept of massive charity fraud and what I'm now loosely referring to is the foreign aid charade. That you actually, when we talk about giving money away, we mean to actually help people in the countries rather than the fat cats around the political establishment and the donor places. But this is an approach where we dive into these big topics. We take them concept by concept, piece by piece, different view by different view, and we lay things out visually for you, thanks to Jason, using his experience and talents out of Hollywood and NYU Film School, with my experience talking to boards of directors in real time about complex, fast-moving business transactions, doing so, helping people along with these slide presentations. And back when I was doing it in the earlier period, when I was doing a lot of hostile takeover defenses and raids, that was before the internet. But now we have Oh, we're all the way up to 210, Jason.
Back in those days, Charles, you had to hand crank the hostile takeovers.
Exactly right. Exactly. I got on my horse, and ride out a few weeks out to Trenton, New Jersey. Anyway, today this is, I guess, our 210th podcast, most of which have these pull-down presentations. I know, Jason, you can help people understand how they might see these pull-down presentations.
So basically what I've done, Charles, is I've put all the videos we've done together, all the episodes of Sunday with Charles, and Charles Ortel is closing in. We've put them into a playlist on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, which is currently still recovering from a malicious set of strikes from social engineers preventing live streaming on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel. So people can watch the live streams on Crowdsource The Truth 2 on YouTube. They can also watch on Periscope or Facebook or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And for people who are listening to us on iTunes or Spotify or any of the other podcasting platforms, they might really benefit from watching the video version of the show, because for each video we've done, well, I should say the overwhelming majority of them, in the description for the video, if you click on Show More right here, it'll drop down a whole sort of paragraph of information that includes the sponsorship links and this link that always says download Charles's presentation. And if you click on that, it takes you right to the PDF. You've got this download icon that you can use to save it to your local computer, print it out, do whatever you want to do with it. But it's a great way for people to follow along or to follow up on things that you've discussed and links that you've brought to people's attention. This is actually having a significant effect. We've got some allies, associates, and now even friends around the world, Charles, who through watching this show have connected with influencers, local politicians, sometimes even national politicians. So we got some momentum here.
No, I agree. We got to, and what we're doing here, you can pull these presentations down and print them out, but you could do it electronically on your computer, and there you can follow all these links. And so the approach, now that I've done this for more than 10 years, these type of media appearances, what always happens in the beginning is if you get a chance to pitch to somebody, they always say, well, I'm very busy. Give it to me in 20 seconds. Or give it to me in, what's your elevator pitch? Or whatever.
Elevator pitch,
And you do that, and they say, well, God, that's a gigantic story that GE is potentially going to go out of business. Do you have any details? I haven't heard any details yet. You say, well, you told me to give you an elevator pitch. So you have to do it both ways. You have to have these video approaches, then you have to give people the library. And what's often very useful, now that we are at 210, on average, roughly 2-hour podcasts, that is a hell of a lot of production. I mean, to put that in perspective, and I know it's a different format and a different genre and a totally different approach to life, but very well-known shows like Seinfeld and others do not have anywhere near this number of hours. And of course, they're comedy and they're
not as funny as this.
Well, they're pretty funny. But anyway, so that's the approach we try to take, and I'm very happy that we have been doing it this way, Jason. I appreciate your time and patience and support, because I think what will happen...
I don't have patience.
Okay, then I don't appreciate your lack of patience. But what's going to happen in time, once this finally does drop in the same way that it dropped with General Electric, people around the world are going to go back and say, wait a minute, who was warning about this when? Why didn't we listen to the people? What were they saying? And how much extra liability has been created by government's refusals to do the correct thing and stop this fraud when they could have stopped it back in 2001, when dopey James Comey was given the task of leading as a U.S. attorney at the end of December 2001, replacing Mary Jo White, who had the opening salvos on February 15th, 2001. How come that dynamic duo, and then ultimately with Robert Mueller as head of the FBI and Rod Rosenstein as head of the Justice Department Tax Fraud Division, how come they didn't see an obvious charity fraud where nothing was audited, no regulations were complied with? How come they didn't see this? And I don't think there are any good reasons for that.
Eyes were closed. That's the reason.
Too busy playing with Legos.
I was going to get the Star Wars Lego image, but this one is a good one too. Call me kind of hands off right there. Right. Charles, I don't know if we've spoken too much. Maybe we did on Sunday. Andrew McCabe not getting arrested. Very upsetting. Yeah, we did speak about it.
We'll get to that in a second, Jason. That's a good point. So if people want to send constructive suggestions, and I appreciate those that I'm getting now, both on my website and via Twitter, I can't always immediately follow up with everybody just because I've gotten kind of busy, but I do appreciate the many thoughtful suggestions and even the criticisms. I'm not in a position at this moment to, stop looking at this and start looking at something completely different in a different country.
People want you to do this. Charles should look at this.
Yeah, I'm not right now. But
Bespoke Investigations by Charles Ortel.
Now, this is interesting. All of a sudden, I'm getting more followers again. I was at 37.2 flat for a long time. But it's...
who knows how Twitter operates, They
probably doesn't. Actually, just up here on the right, see that Roscoe over there?
Yeah.
I should follow him.
Oh, yeah.
And Roscoe has done a lot of great work and a lot of great threads.
I just saw Roscoe for the first time the other day. He put out a tweet, very kind tweet, promoting this show.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I think I follow. That must be your Twitter thing, because I'm pretty sure I follow him. Anyway.
Yeah, this is mine.
Okay, good.
This is my computer.
It is? I thought this was HQ.
Yeah. Anywho, so if we could go back into the slides.
That's a good thought. Why don't we go to the next page?
Yeah.
So we have this just out, that apparently the Justice Department has appointed the U.S. Attorney, this is out yesterday, in the Eastern District of New York to consolidate all the Ukraine-related investigations. And somebody sent this to me and said, "Whoa, that's horrible."
Why?
Because the Eastern District is where Loretta Lynch is from. She ran the East. She was the U.S.
Brooklyn, isn't it?
It's the East. It's like Brooklyn and Long Island. So I don't know what to make of this, but I do think that the facts that are out there that have been shared by ourselves and by Larry Doyle and John Moynihan and many other people, the facts are so ugly that and the reality
makes Hillary Clinton look good.
The reality is so true that there is an election looming, and Donald Trump does not have the ability, I don't think, to win the election while saying he needs more time to drain the swamp. He's got, this is obvious that there are a lot of dirty people out there. I think Wray, I'm not buying the FBI director Wray as being a white hat. When his name was first floated out there, the first thing I did is contact Sidney Powell, whose book mentions Wray and Wray not being a good egg, saying, what do you make of this, Sidney? And she said, this is a disaster. This is, several, I guess, years ago now. So Donald Trump is, I think, seeing a lot of enthusiasm. I got a chance to watch his flyover at the Daytona 500, and then that was something else. And the ads he's putting out there, the fact he's doing 3 rallies. Think about this type of a schedule for you, Jason. You're going to do 3 rallies: Phoenix today, Colorado Springs tomorrow, then you're going to go out to Las Vegas, and then you're going to go to India.
Ooh.
And you're going to you're going to appear at a crowd with the leader of the country of over 100,000 people in a newly built cricket stadium and go all over India for a grand total of 2 days and fly back or fly somewhere else.
Does he, they must know where he's staying and have everything set up.
Even so, it's just, in my experience with India, I think I've told you this before. My advice to people in India, and I said this to my own children before they went out there.
Don't go.
Well, I like it just to see the problem with India is, the first problem with India is it's a lovely place. I like it and I would go back. But the problem is, there are a lot of people there. It's dirty, and there's dirt in the air, and the music in the background is this,
Oh, yeah.
and then and then you have, which it's nice sounding music, and then you have the flies buzzing everywhere. Fly buzz, fly buzz, fly buzz.
None of this sounds good.
And then you get into a room, Jason, and the thing that habit Indian people have, and it's not, it's just a habit, is they're constantly shaking their heads back and forth like this, back and forth like this, and you have them shaking their heads, and you have and the fly buzzing, whatever, and your stomach is like, where's the McDonald's?
Why do you want to go back?
Well, once you get used to it, it's I have been all over India, not everywhere you could go, but many nice places, and I have great friends there, and I'd recommend it. But you have to understand that if you go there, the chances are extremely high that you will be very jet lagged. You may get an upset stomach, and you're on your first trip, even with the best possible friends helping you, whatever. It's going to be tough to go there for 2 days. That's rugged. I mean, it's 9.5 hours different from New York.
Has Trump ever been there before?
Probably, but I'm just saying, it's just this kind of a schedule for somebody age 73 doing whatever else he's doing. I mean,
yeah,
that's admirable. So then we get to the question of, a big question for me is Assange, and I know for you as well. I mean, it would seem to me that rather than have a Mueller-led investigation where you go after Jerry Corsi and you go after me and you go after in a lesser way and you go after other people, and you don't ask dopey James Comey why, as my friend from the South likes to say, why in the fuck did you not immediately say to the Democrats, give us all of your servers? Right? And what the hell?
What kind of investigation is that?
Let's give it to a foreign-controlled company that, because FBI can't look at this. We wouldn't want our government officials to find out that, say, the Democratic Party was corrupt. Why did nobody go back and say, go over the ground of what was going on in the period where the DNC material was hacked or leaked, or whatever happened? Who has studied that? Why, when they were studying that, didn't they also get to the bottom of the Iwan brothers, and why these foreign nationals or foreign connected people were involved with so many Congress people, having access to top secret information potentially that flowed through these Congress people's internet domains and servers and devices? Why did they start there and say, what the hell was going on in June? And then once you got through with that, and going over the case of, what were the FBI people doing? Why did they not go down these alleys that they should have gone down? Who were the people involved? How is it possible that the very people who were, in theory, in quotes, investigating Hillary Clinton are the same people who then were in Crossfire Hurricane? I mean, it's just, there are a lot of obvious questions here. And now we have the story into, the deplorable beast, the Daily Beast or whatever. Somebody's running up the story suggesting that on the at the instigation of the president, a former Republican congressman was trying to get the WikiLeaks Assange to say that Russia was not involved.
I say there's no way that's
this
true.
Is bullshit. Yeah, I think it's total bullshit. And it's just another sign of desperation. I think that. We see this petition of 2,000 plus people saying that Barr needs to resign, and this are all signs to me that somebody, maybe it's not Durham, but somebody is over the target and has been over the target. We didn't put a link in here to, I think you sent it to me, Jason, but there's a story in The Hill where they've been analyzing John Solomon's contributions on Ukraine, and they're trying now to cast aspersions about his work. And I find John Solomon, you and I both know him, I find him to be very careful in his work.
Yeah, it's weird what The Hill is doing.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on?
Exactly. So, and we haven't heard recently from John, so let's hope he's okay. Then we have, this is hilarious, Donald Trump is absolutely correct. He is the chief legal officer. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the chief poobah of the United States of America.
Grand poobah, get him a fez.
Exactly. I think he should go full South American dictator with a sash and the big military
Start dressing like Gaddafi with robes
Yeah,
and all
like-
kinds of weird hats.
And he could even do a little, what would it be, a little red book? Oh, Mao did that already, so it'd have to be a different color. A little gold book.
No, Dr. Corsi is writing the little red book of democratic lies.
Is he really?
Yeah,
That's
but it's
funny.
going to be a big book.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll probably have to eat a whole library for that one. But so there's back and forth. Is Barr pissed at Trump? Is he not pissed at Trump? What's really going on here? I have to believe, frankly, that Barr, as you rightly point out, he worked for HW in the waning years of HW's period there as president in his only term. He is on the grounds for suspicion list, in my view, and every minute, frankly, at this stage, that it takes them to do something about, and now you can't say that it's potentially obstructing the Mueller inquiry. You can't say it's obstructing the impeachment inquiry. He's got an open hand now, and you got multiple people soliciting for charities that have never been organized or operated in compliance with required laws and regulations. And, you've got to do something about it. And there's an obvious way to close the budget deficit by going after people who are donating to these charities. So we now have, I like to refer to him as Michael Doomberg, because everything's negative with the guy. Tonight, and I don't know what time he takes the stage New York time. Is it... because it's out there in Las Vegas, so I wonder.
It's 3 hours time difference.
So I wonder if it's as late as 9 o'clock our time. But Mike is. I mean, he's had experience in a tough media market in New York, Metro New York. He's been around for a while, and obviously he's a veteran, well-connected dude. So he will be able to think on his feet. But he's up against swamp rats. I mean, Joe Biden. His campaign is, I don't know that it's on life support, and he's got to do something here. Amy Klobuchar, America's favorite librarian, and I like librarians, but I mean she comes across as just an maybe agreeable librarian until you read Peter Schweitzer's book.
I don't think she's agreeable.
Yeah, all these people, and have got to go for the kill here. And, I'm sure Buttigieg, as the poorest guy on the podium, is going to have to make some comments about some pandering comments against Bloomberg. So it'll be interesting to see whether and how it exceeds the expectations set years ago by a friend of ours, John Fund, who is a gifted writer for National Review and Fox contributor at times. He said, this is going to be like watching a circular firing squad. I mean, this is if you like beer, buy as much beer as you want, and if you like popcorn, just watch this. It's going to be great.
It's like Battle of the Idiots, Charles. Look at this guy. Come on. How is this guy running for president? It's just absurd on the face of it.
He looks a bit like Mr. Bean.
Yeah, that he does. He looks a bit like a guy who is going to be a Trivial Pursuit question in 2030, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, remember that guy?"
Well, yeah, there's an app or whatever you call it online for Buttigieg nonsense sentences that you just it just makes. I mean, when you really listen to what he has to say, he's spouting utter nonsense. They're in English language. There's nouns and there are verbs, there are adjectives and adverbs, but there's no substance, So then you have this issue. I mean, this is a sad but an hysterical headline. Bernie and Bloomberg argue over who had a heart attack. I mean,
That's literally like a George Carlin, Richard Pryor sketch.
I mean, it's hilarious.
They did that one time on Johnny Carson. I lead you in heart attacks. Yeah, but I had a stroke. Doing all this stuff.
But this generation that came of age in the 1960s, saying that you can't trust anybody over the age of 30, is now in their 70s fighting to cling to relevance and indeed to continue leading the country. And look at that's a face that even his own mother couldn't love.
This is the face of a guy who needs to be on the couch saying, "Where is that damn remote control?"
Exactly. Yeah,
Sorry, Bernie.
I'm trying to get the Cuban talk station.
What do you mean they canceled? What's the Drew Carey show?
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I can't believe I don't remember it. That just killed the joke. Price is Right.
Yeah,
How could
did they cancel that?
Something happened. Drew Carey's wife got killed, or his
Really?
fiance, or something very strange happening with the Price is Right.
He's a gifted comic.
He's funny, but I never watched that show. My grandfather used to watch it every single day, but that was before
Drew Carey.
Yeah, what's that guy's name? Bob Barker. That was when Bob Barker still had black hair.
Is that right? Yeah. I love those old games. Well, of course, I began my media career on To Tell the Truth.
Right. I don't
a
know
long time ago. 42 years, 43 years ago. Anyway, Bernie, he's going to win 99% of the faculty lounges in America, of course. All the prep schools and boarding schools and public schools, they're all going to be all in for Bernie, and people will be dragged in out of their parents' sub-basements. Maybe if they're not too, hungover and stoned to show up and vote. But, I do think the in quotes, establishment of the Democratic Party are correct to fear what will ultimately happen to Bernie Sanders in the general election. I mean, he is not going to surge to a victory at this stage, even if he puts in Stacey Abrams as vice president or whoever people are talking about. He's done. And remarkably, Jason, in the last 24 hours, I don't know if you know this, that that Bernie has dissed AOC.
Ooh, why did he do that?
AOC said that Sanders' plan for Medicare for all is much more than we can deliver, and Sanders is saying no.
Wait, AOC, who wants a $93 trillion train to Japan, thinks something is too expensive?
Yeah. So anyway, I think.
So what did Bernie say?
He said that Medicare for all is a compromise. I mean, he's been waiting a long time for it, and he's just going to stick to his guns on Medicare for all. I mean, the thing about him is he's at this point, he doesn't understand it yet, but he's a caricature of himself. I mean, I think Larry David plays a more agreeable version of Bernie Sanders.
Maybe he should run for president.
He'd probably win.
Honestly, he'd be a more interesting candidate than anyone they have on the Democratic
on the Democrat side.
Yeah.
It would actually be a very funny debate, Larry David versus Donald Trump.
Not only that, Charles, I think he would give President Trump a run for his money. I'd like to hear what Larry David's platform is on some of this stuff.
It'd be pretty funny, yeah.
Putin? Let me tell you, he'd go to some meeting with Putin and there'd be a typo and that would destroy the whole thing. That would be hilarious.
And just the theme song instead of Hail to the Chief would be the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song.
Could be great. Okay, so back to slides. Sorry, Charles, we're having a little too much fun.
All right. Now, as far as Bite Me is concerned, it's now a 15-point lead in the national polls of Bernie over Bite Me. And I understand that one of Joe's brothers, I think, had a business that he was involved with raided by the FBI.
Whoa, when was that?
In the last 24 hours or so. Now look at this.
That's huge news.
Look at Breitbart here. I mean, remember I'm not bragging here, but just here this is Breitbart does pretty good stuff. Oh, look at this. And Andrew Yang, the successful businessman, is now going to be a political commentator for fake news CNN. I mean,
really ridiculous.
But here's a story that came out today, and if you go up to the top, Jason, it shows how many Facebook shares. Only 169 Facebook shares, whereas that audit the IRS thing that I did in 2015 had 80,000.
So quite a few more.
Yeah. Well, and this is early days. I mean, mine took a while to get to 80,000, but this is interesting to me. I think that the counts, and this is a Breitbart-controlled site, so I mean, you would think that they get the counts right.
I get they get that information from whoever this is. So.
Facebook, yeah. And isn't it funny that Soros is now upset with Zuckerberg and wants Zuckerberg out of the company that Zuckerberg has a big percentage interest
in?
In
Soros?
Well, he's got to
removal. Why does he want to remove?
Because he thinks that I think this could be a false flag bullshit move, but he's saying that he believes that Zuckerberg will flip the election for Trump. Because remember, Zuckerberg met with Trump and all that.
This is a ruse.
I know, a total ruse.
I don't believe anything Zuckerberg says. I don't believe anything George Soros says.
Or as Glenn Beck refers to him, spooky dude. And he does look like a spooky dude.
He
Foot falter.
I have a feeling that James Comey has a Lego Emperor Palpatine somewhere that looks exactly like George Soros.
And then, people really need to listen to the South Bend, Indiana residents who are very negative on this Pete Buttigieg. And I think behind the somewhat agreeable patina of Pete Buttigieg and the earnestness of him, I mean, South Bend is a wreck. And he has, when he's pressed, you would notice when Buttigieg is pressed, he talks unity, he talks nice, but he's, all in for some really far out concepts.
Like what?
Like, he's on abortion, he's quite fine with, abortion as late as possible. And if, anybody who's actually gone through the process of going to one of those amniocentesis things and looking at the screen, and you see an infant or a baby to be at 12 weeks. And yes, it's very small, and not really, doesn't yet seem like a baby, but something's going on there. And certainly by 20 weeks, 24 weeks, 36 weeks, 40 weeks to term typically. I mean, to think that you would be all in for aborting a baby at, after birth, as the governor of Virginia suggested, or in very late term, is that should be obviously a decision primarily between the doctor, a real medical doctor, and the mother.
The doctor and the baby. They should be like, well, baby.
No, and the mother. No. But it should. That's a very. I mean, obviously, most people don't like
make a decision to kill a child after you've had it. That's murder.
No, I'm talking about before birth. So in the late term, the third trimester, most people say you can't do it at all. And here's Buttigieg saying, well, I'm not comfortable with that. We're trying to start a family, Jason and I.
You want to hear a very funny story, Charles?
I do.
A friend of mine who we've referred to on this show before, he can be seen exiting the bus right before the famous Donald Trump grab him by the you-know-what thing. So he was going to college and he was getting his hair cut. He went to some, kind of rural place, getting his hair cut for the first time at a new place. And this woman who's cutting his hair is making conversation. She's like, I was watching Oprah Winfrey the other day, and they said there's some method they can use to test if your baby is going to be retarded. And my friend said, you mean amniocentesis? And she said, no, retarded.
And she was cutting his hair. He goes, yeah, I'm done. I'm good.
Well, you don't need to know about amniocentesis.
No, but you got scissors next to your ear and throat.
It was a funny moment.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. So then we have, here's Harry Reid, that paragon of virtue, but we are talking about Nevada this Saturday, the caucus. Here's Harry Reid suggesting that maybe it's time for a really competent person like Michelle Obama
to run for president.
No, she's not going to run. To be drafted at the convention. I mean, she can't be. Neither Hillary nor Michelle can be bothered.
So what does that all mean? Be drafted at the I don't know if we ever seen that. Do people know what that's all about?
Not. You have to go back to the Chicago convention. I think in '68. Where you can't agree on through the nobody has a clear majority once the primaries are done. So you go to the convention in the smoke-filled room, or I guess non-smoke-filled room now these days with what do they call those things? Smokeless tobacco.
Yeah, the vape-filled room.
Yeah, exactly. Hemp-filled room. And you go and you come up with the nominees, where the party elders get together, and there's a theory, I think. And I was onto this a long time ago that you look at the rising field, no one emerged, frankly, has so far emerged who really seems to me to have what it takes on the Democratic side. And so you could imagine, there are people who admire Michelle Obama and think she'd be a great manager based on I don't know what evidence, but that's what they think. And she does, she's popular. And
she's popular is the key thing.
And you could imagine that people might, having watched Joe Biden squander a lead and Mike Bloomberg, throw people up against the wall and demand that they vote for him after he
Is that
plays them.
stop and vote?
Yeah, stop and vote. Here's $400 and shut up.
It's like stop and frisk. Charles, Grateful Girl is reminding us via Super Chat on Crowdsource the Truth too that Bloomberg is a Me Too mess. I didn't know anything about that. Although we did have a story on True Pundit yesterday that he was sniffing little girls, Joe Biden style.
Well, it's worse than that. So, coming up, there are multiple stories of payoffs of, people who are either offended
Really?
by what he said or, worse than that. And people, particularly people like Michael Bloomberg, who are so rich, can also become the targets of false accusations.
Right.
And it can be cheaper to pay those people off than to fight them in court. All that being said, you look at the guy's personality, you see the way he treats people. It would not, he has a tin ear. He doesn't understand, when he's saying stuff that he may be 100% right, but, you don't say stuff to people the way he says it, and then think that you're going to be the great uniter. Interestingly, here's a piece in American Thinker talking about Barack Obama as a traitor, looking back over his record. And you saw in the last 24, 48 hours, Donald Trump react to Barack Obama's statement that the economic recovery is all because of Obama's policies. And Trump said, well, here's another con job. He didn't say this is a con job. He said, right, it's another con job. And I think, you are going to have people go back into the record, the long record, the known record of Barack Obama, and maybe finally do the type of work that needs to be done here. I mean, frankly, I think it'd be relevant to go into Donald Trump's academic history as well as the other challengers. I mean, it is reasonable to go back and say, if you say you were a smart student at Wharton, well, show us your transcript. If you said you were a brilliant professor at Harvard Law School or wherever he taught law in Illinois, University of Chicago, show us your damn transcript. How did you get from the Hawaii private school to Occidental? How did you transfer into Columbia? How did you do at Columbia? How did you get into Harvard Law School? What were you doing for those 5 years when nobody seems to know what you were doing between Columbia and Harvard Law School? How did you actually become president of the Harvard Law Review? What does that mean anyway? Show us your actual writing. I mean, there's a fair amount of stuff that, he never really had to do. And yet, with Brett Kavanaugh, we've got to go back into, when he's 14 or 15 years old at a weekend party. You could let people...
Did you drink a beer?
Yeah, exactly. Were you disorganized? No, I was too organized. Then you were a nerd. Yeah, that's why I'm going to be a Supreme Court justice, because I'm a nerd.
Right. I mean, that was such a ridiculous... It's almost like we don't even remember it fully because there's been so much more ridiculous stuff to happen since then. It's also very interesting, Charles, to peruse these sort of Google images and see, like, I was trying to find some weird images of Christopher Wray. Like, anybody who's testified before Congress, there are these choice images that they pull from the video where, it's like people do it to me too. You go through, thousands of hours of videos. You can find people making weird faces in the middle of a word. But it's interesting to see who those images do not exist for.
Yeah, I'd say, here he looks like Simon Legree.
Yeah.
But actually, on that, one interesting thing that's happened, there have been multiple stories I've read about where Ruth Bader Ginsburg has actually been extremely complimentary of Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, which is interesting.
Is she still alive?
Some would say. So, the final piece here, there's been an arrest. There actually, Justice Department has quite a few news releases that are coming out on a daily basis now of charities being wound up, people who fake being doctors being wound up. And here is somebody who's just been arrested who did not tell the U.S. government, as is required, that person was working on behalf of the Russian government. And in the case, the big picture on this Clinton Foundation stuff is not merely that the paperwork is all wrong and that money has disappeared and lots of it. The big issue is that a sitting senator of the United States that a former president of the United States and our Secretary of State for a time and a leading candidate for president were simultaneously inveigling for more power, whether as a senator or in Secretary of State land or whatever, as their spouse and daughter were running a crooked charity in bold defiance of all applicable laws, with that charity acting on behalf of foreign-controlled entities around the world. Not simply the big donors that were giving the charity money, but also the poorer countries that were recipients of that donor aid, often employed as agent the Clinton Foundation, or pieces of it, or stuff they thought was the Clinton Foundation, to do work. And that money has disappeared. I mean, it's bad enough, stealing's never a good thing, but if you steal from the rich, people call you Robin Hood. If you steal from the poor, they should call you felon number XYZ in the cell next to Madoff. And that's one of the reasons I'm so exercised about this Clinton Foundation thing. They're stealing from the poor. They're stealing from the very vulnerable, the most vulnerable people around the world. And still, Hillary could walk around and act like she should be, at the broker
she
convention.
Already won.
Yeah, she is the president. What a silly me.
She's going to win again, according to her, Charles.
Yeah.
Now, I got a question for you here. This is about Hector Alejandro Cabrera Fuentes,
right?
A Mexican citizen residing in Singapore. Why does it seems weird?
If you're inside the United States, acting for a foreign government, you got to register.
Even if you're not American?
I think so.
I mean, I guess so. This guy's Mexican.
Yeah, he's got enough names. He must be one of the 6 Mexican people living in Singapore.
Right. I think they're going to make, they're going to arrest this guy and he's going to pay for it. It's the policy for everything to do with Mexico.
Good. All right, so we're going to take a little time here and talk about this crazy C-40. So when you're a mayor of a big city, I got to imagine it's kind of a bummer, right? You're a mayor of New York, and you got a senator can get on a plane and go on a fact-finding mission to, the Bahamas or Europe in the summer or whatever. But you're stuck here in New York. You go on a fact-finding mission to Staten Island,
to Queens, right?
Check Williamsburg out and see if people
find out how that In-N-Out burger made it to the street.
Yeah, those people are pretty hip down there, Williamsburg. How do I do that? But so
you get to give people the key to the city, Charles. That's pretty cool.
That's huge. Huge. But
when's the last time anybody got the key to New York, and what does it open?
Let's hope it opens the jails, obviously.
Oh, so they gave it to Epstein.
That's right. So you sit there and you say, all right, you're a mayor. This started in London. And in these mega cities where you have a lot of people flying in from all over the world, most of these big cities purchase a lot of goods and services each year, some because their own workforces are unionized, they're very expensive, so it's logical to outsource. And then you've got capital projects, so you've got all these things that, you have the GEs and the Siemens of the world all trying to do deals with the big cities, ostensibly to reduce the carbon footprint.
Don't the unions usually vote kind of in blocks, like they all agree to?
Right, so here somebody comes up with this idea of creating this thing called C40 Climate Leadership Group and invite big city mayors to go to these conferences around the world where you can talk smack in a closed setting about this initiative in New York and that initiative in Oslo and another initiative in Johannesburg, and you have the caterers, you have the hookers, you have whatever at these conferences.
Unionized hookers.
That would be in Amsterdam, I think. And then you get together and then you write reports about how great it is. You get dumb schmuck governments to give money to it, and rich foundations give money to it, and it sounds really impressive. I mean, it sounds like, hey, you got all these mayors. Somebody must have checked this shit out to make sure that it actually exists as a charity. And Mike Bloomberg's this genius who created, Bloomberg LP in his own city. You would think that he might have checked to make sure that C40 Climate Leadership Group actually existed as a legal entity.
Well, but this is a pattern, Charles. We see these things happening where, yes, logically, anybody involved should have been checking, but yet they don't. So.
Well, but Bloomberg's whole business is analyzing
facts.
The reports on companies and bond issues and other things. He's a kind of team. I mean, generally speaking, they are very careful, but also Bloomberg was vain. Here he was, mayor of New York, and stuck in New York. And the Clintons, I bet you, came along and said, hey, Mike, you want to be chairman of C40, this collection of people who are going to reduce, the climate, work on climate change, and you can swan around the world now as chairman of this thing and make New York, take victory laps about what you've done here in New York, burnish your credentials, gives you a foreign policy avenue. And so, Mike, on Bloomberg Philanthropies, we have the link on the next page, on the 21st of September 2010, just as Lois Lerner was persecuting Tea Party groups, making it incredibly difficult for you to get a charity across the line, and worse, auditing or threatened to audit the donors to your charity. Just at that moment, Mike issues a press release saying, oh yeah, we're really happy. I'm going to be the chairman of this C40 climate leadership group. And I'll take over in November. And in his press release, he says, I'd also like to thank President Bill Clinton for the poisoned chalice he gave me to drink. And then you see another name we know, Boris Johnson, who's going to remain honorary deputy chair and the C40 secretariat. I love this. It sounds like we've got we're emulating the Communist Party. Whenever an organization has a secretariat, I get nervous about it. But the secretariat for this organization will be based in London. And it says here the C40 was launched in 2005. And Boris talks all kinds of happy talk about Mayor Bloomberg. Later, Bloomberg gets knighted.
Wow, really? I thought you can't be knighted if you're American.
Reagan was knighted. You're knighted, but you're not, huh?
Boris giving the thumbs up.
Yeah. An American citizen can, have the sword, I think, go over you, but you're not technically Sir Michael Bloomberg. You're Michael Bloomberg, Order of the British Empire, or some other title like that. But as we've been over before, and for the newcomers need to understand that and I'm not practicing law here, I just believe I've read enough about this to know that if you want to operate a charity, it actually has to exist. It has to be. If it's going to be a corporation, it has to have articles of incorporation.
That's quite novel, Charles.
Bylaws have to be adopted, and articles have to be adopted by the actual trustees or directors of the entity. Then it's got to comply with the relevant laws. So if it wants to operate a U.S. charity, it has to first be formed in the United States. If it wants to operate internationally, it has to have subsidiaries set up in those foreign places that comply with the local laws. It has to be controlled from a U.S. base. You can't have an entity, C40 Climate Leadership Group, start out in London, as this apparently did, with no evidence that there's any legal documents suggesting there was more than a bunch of mayors who like to go out and travel around the world and be catered to by the multinational companies that want to grift doing capital projects that are financed by the crooked bankers that will do all that for you. So, this, to me, this is, at first blush, I'd be looking at this if I were advising a Michael Bloomberg as mayor of New York City, and I would say, this sounds like a great idea, such a good idea that you should waddle as quickly as you can away from it, because you're the richest guy in the room who's going to get his ass sued off once people realize that this is nothing more than a way to construct crooked deals for people who are close to who are political cronies of all these mayors around the world.
So why hasn't he been sued?
Well, that could happen. So, there's this document we showed people before. You cannot have a formless aggregation qualify for exemption. In other words, if you want to be actually under U.S. law charity, you've got to, when you put your application in, next page, at the top, or maybe, is this page 2?
There's no numbers.
Yeah, one, next page. Yeah. Second paragraph.
Yeah.
You can't be a formless aggregation of individuals. That's lifted from a decision. You can't be something that when you check it, there's no evidence that there's actually articles of incorporation. There's no evidence that you actually registered to operate in the state where you claim you're based or where your headquarters is. That's a formless aggregation. That's not a charity. So the question in this one is whether Mike, and this would be the way in which the Clintons, I believe, have operated, or the people with the Clintons. They get people, they promise them something that sounds too good to be true, which isn't true. They lure the people in to do it. people start doing it, and then they can't get out without admitting that they're not as smart as they thought. So my suspicion is that Mike Bloomberg was duped here, not that he's part of a criminal conspiracy because he wanted to be. All right, but nonetheless, he issues this press release on the 21st of September 2010 from New York City stating that he is going to be chairman of something that has existed since 2005. So the question is any of that true? Did it exist since 2005? I don't know. Let's take a look. We have in Clinton Foundation annual reports, which are not legal documents, and I've provided links for you for 7, 8, and 9. We have a claim in the annual report for 7 that President Clinton launched the Clinton Climate Initiative in 2006. Now, President Clinton was not an officer or a trustee or a director of the Clinton Foundation, and the Clinton Foundation had no authority to do something called the Clinton Climate Initiative at any time, but not in 2006. And then they say in 2007 in this report that at that time CCI is working with C40. So the question is, did C40 exist as a legal entity in the United States or anywhere in 2007? They say they started in 2005. And it says here that this non-existent Clinton Climate Initiative is working with 40 of the world's largest cities. Now, that's a lot of stuff to do. I mean, I can imagine working with one is tough, but with 40, I mean, when you work with a city, what does that mean? You've got reports back and forth, emails, meetings, 40 cities, one little Clinton Climate Initiative. I mean, you would think you'd have thousands of people doing that if they're meaningful projects. And then in 2008, they say again, CCI became the implementing, they love that, implement, they love to use that word, better than torture, the implementing arm of the C40, who are trying to reduce greenhouse gases, the C40. That sounds sexy. And then in 9, he says, in 2006, we partnered with the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. So here's 3 examples in marketing documents that have circulated all over the place while the Clinton Foundation was fundraising. They claim that the Clinton Climate Initiative existed in these early years and that it worked with C40. All right?
Yeah.
So let's go to the next page. Now these are this is a lift from a previous slide, a slide in a previous presentation, where we've lifted numbers that are hidden on the Clinton Foundation website from the versions of the audit that they put up. They're intentionally false. They leave these disclosures out. This seems to show that something called Clinton Climate Initiative had $28 million of revenue between 2007 and 2009, but with all that revenue coming in, they spent in total on the hard programs of this Clinton Climate Initiative $63,000. You can't even get a good Porsche for that. I mean,
$63,000?
$63,000. They took in $28 million. They said, this is such an important initiative. We're going to spend less than a Porsche on it, less than a good Tesla in this Clinton Climate Initiative.
No, actually, you get a Model 3, I think, is 50 grand.
Not in New York.
Is that right?
I think it's, well, anyway, let's not
It's
quibble.
not a lot.
It's close to one Tesla. It's like,
Exactly.
You can just go buy a Tesla instead of giving the Clinton Climate Initiatives $28.5 million.
Get that Cybertruck.
Yeah, and then the allocated expenses. I mean, you're putting 31. I spent $63 million on the frontline tough expense, $63,000 on the tough frontline expenses, but $31 million on overhead. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you do in the Defense Department for those $500 toilets. I mean, this is crazy stuff. But with a straight face, the quote BKD masterpiece audits that.
It's like masterpiece theater,
right? Masterpiece fiction. They obviously trying to pretend that they allocate $28.5 million. There's no search that I've done on any of many possible search engine vehicles, portals, etc., reveals to me that there ever was a legal entity specifically created called Clinton Climate Initiative in compliance with any major nation's laws and regulations. Maybe they did it in Malta. Maybe they did it in pick a place, Panama or someplace I haven't looked at yet. But on Open Corporates, which purports to get information on most corporation filings around the world, doesn't come up. They never tried to register CCI in New York. and the application that we're going to go through in a second that they submitted for federal tax exemption in 2012 is riddled with material errors. So if we go to the next page.
Sam Rick recommends that you don't buy Tesla.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if he's talking about the cars or the stock.
Thanks for that. So on the 21st of September, Mike Bloomberg is like, hey, guess what, Ma? I'm going to be chairman of C40. You can imagine if his mother were still alive. He's like,
yeah, I was going to say, no way.
Don't play with that. That stuff's dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, that's not C4, Mom. It's C40.
Even
10
better.
times as more explosive. But anyway, only on the 22nd of November, 2010. Now, Jason, 22nd of November, 2010. Is that after the 21st of September, 2010?
Seems to be one day after.
Or more like 2 months?
Oh,
no.
Sorry. September, yes.
Yeah, well after, right? So he says, guess what, Ma? I'm going to be chairman, of this thing, only it doesn't exist. And it isn't technically organized on the 22nd of November 2010 because all that happened on that day is that one lawyer in Delaware submitted paperwork to just incorporate the thing in Delaware. It's not clear from the papers that are in New York State, a state that I think New York City still is in, that maybe the mayor could have had a lawyer or two on his staff say, does this freaking thing actually exist, boys and girls and other genders? Does it exist? I mean, and it's obvious that it didn't exist at the time he crowed about being the chairman. If it didn't exist on November 22nd, 2010, it obviously didn't exist before then. So how could it have been doing work around the world with all these press releases since 2005? Unclear that the directors ever adopted the articles. No sign that the directors actually adopted bylaws. And this thing only registered with the New York Secretary of State to do business, which is required on the 15th of February, 2012. So Mike is chairman of this thing in 2010. He gives money to it in 2010. In 11, it doesn't even register to do business in New York State until 2012. And then they file, after the election, after Obama's reelected, they file an application for federal tax exemption on the 24th of November 2013, which eventually is granted. Now, in this application, it says, this C40, they call it C40 Inc., it's going to work with the C40 mayors, which happen to be in 59, not 40 cities. And it says here in the application for federal tax exemption, the coalition came together in 2005. And then it says they work with the Clinton Climate Initiative Cities Program. So not only does the Clinton Climate Initiative supposedly exist, it has a program called the Cities Program. And it says here to achieve C40's charitable purposes. And this could have been written by Pete Buttigieg, the next sentence. This collaboration brings significant resources and infrastructure to enhancing and accelerating historic activities and positions, the combined effort as one of the preeminent climate action groups in the world. Okay. That works for you. But anyway, so C40 has given grants to the Clinton Foundation by its admission under penalties of perjury to the IRS, none in 10, 4.2 million is a lot in 11, 3.7 in 2012, only 600,000 in 2013, 8.5 million went to this Clinton Foundation, which there is no Clinton Foundation. There's maybe a William J. Clinton Foundation, but it doesn't have in this period, or after April 25th, 2005, it doesn't have bylaws. It hasn't registered properly. It hasn't reported properly. It hasn't been audited properly. Other than that, Mike Bloomberg said, hey, 8.5 million, no problem.
Other than that, Mayor Bloomberg, how did you like the foundation?
Exactly.
Charles, Frank Rizzo is asking if you tried searching the dark web. I told everybody, I don't think you really know too much about how to get to the dark web.
Yeah, I try to stay in the light, but yeah, I'm not a tech. I mean, I have trouble turning on my computer, so I like to stay with the easy stuff. Frank, if you got ideas about how to search the dark web,
you don't even like onions.
I love onions, actually.
Oh, well, then you're halfway there.
But so in this application, C40 claimed that it wasn't a successor to any previous activities. I mean, how can you say that you started something in 2005, but you're not a successor to it? It is very clear to me that the Democratic establishment found in Mike Bloomberg a sucker on this one. And they roped him into this, and he could not, he was a Republican back when this was going on, but he could not, with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, he could not fess up through this process that he'd been conned basically by this thing, with all these C-40 things going on around the world and tens of millions of dollars. There he is. He had too much. I got ice cream to eat, man. He just couldn't admit the truth. And so is my view, because I honestly don't think that somebody worth $62 billion would say, I'm worth $62 billion, I control this company, I control my life for the rest of my life, I can live what I want. Now what I want to do is scam the world for $8 million or $20 million or $100. It was not something he'd want to do. As a resident of New York City, with incredibly high tax rates and penalties, in the former mayor and now maybe president, or at least certainly maybe a candidate for president.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen as far as him becoming president.
No. So if we go to the final page here, this is a little bit wonky, but I really, there are people out there in our audience who, like as I do, enjoy wonkiness. When you go down a path of creating an American charity that's going to operate internationally, you need to remember that people are going to check in the online portals around the world where you claim you've been doing all this work to see whether you were in fact registered lawfully in these different places. And they're also going to check, as I have, to see if you said you were going to have a narrow set of purposes in America, did you then expand your purposes by setting up a new subsidiary in a place like the UK that is clearly not the same set of priorities that you got approved by the IRS on the basis of a false application? So the original Articles of Incorporation, we've never seen the amended ones, which may, I hope, have limited this, stated that you're going to set this thing up to do charitable, scientific, literary, religious, or educational, anything, which is too broad. Ordinarily, the IRS will say that, no, you've got a limit. That's way too broad. You're going to be either a religion or a literary or scientific. Does that mean you want to be a literary agent too? I mean, you want to be Alfred Einstein?
Just going to decide if they're a religion or a scientist. What?
Yeah, or teacher or whatever. I mean, it's either going to be the religion or anyway. And then it says including, as if that isn't, a broad enough swath, but not limited to. Okay, so this is just saying I'm not saying I won't do more than this. I'm saying explicitly I may do a lot more than this, but the purposes I want to have particular focus on are addressing environment and climate change issues. I mean, I always remember the first time my school, Horace Mann, that I went to, they had quite a good athletic program. And as a youngster in 7th grade, when we started, you were introduced to all sports.
Tennis and fencing, right?
Golf, skeet shooting, not skeet shooting, but golf. And I remember when they first exposed me to golf and said, all right, I want you to do is stand up and address the ball. I'm like, what do I say? Nice ball. Hey, how you doing, ball?
No, that's Art Carney. Hello, ball.
But the same thing was before Art, I knew about Art Carney. Anyway, but you write your specific purpose is to address environmental issues. I mean, that's not necessarily not-for-profit. You can address an environmental issue by saying, you know what? I'm going to set up a dump to take hazardous waste from people who can't find anybody else to dispose of it. And I'm going to make a lot of money by lying about what I do with my dump. I mean, this is not clear that this is, right?
It sounds like a brilliant business idea, Charles.
People do it. Before it was global warming, and then first it was global cooling, now it's global warming. So I'm going to address climate change issues. I mean, what does that mean? That is not, you can say that. That's the kind of stuff Pete Buttigieg probably put in his resume, Elect me mayor of, I have been addressing climate change issues ever since I was 2. I mean, it's just nonsense. And somebody, I've been in very tough discussions with, on air, frankly, with Bloomberg anchors and other people from Bloomberg. There are plenty of smart people at Bloomberg, including many smart lawyers, who would look at this and say, come on, guys. Give me something that's a real statement of purposes. But this is the one that went into the IRS. This is the one that ultimately was approved. And then they decided, remember, they said they started this thing at the Secretariat of C40 in 2005. So if you started the thing in 2005, how come you didn't get around to setting up a subsidiary in the UK till September 29th, 2016? You started in 2005. I mean, that's not time phone hacking. That's just hacking. That's just bullshit, right? So in England, instead of calling something a purpose, they call it an object. It's just, they probably look at us and say, in America, these idiots, instead of calling it an object, call it a purpose. It's the same idea. Here is one that says we can be a religion, but we're going to address the ball on environmental issues. This one says, all right, we're going to do environmental protection. We're going to, they specifically say, reduce greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and any other gas that may be identified from time to time as having a global warming potential. Now think how broad that is. It doesn't say by reputable scientific authorities. Yeah. It says that anybody, you could have
AOC could
say it's a problem.
A cow farted.
Yeah, or just oxygen.
Oh, yeah, cause oxygen.
Everyone, you know, we got to get rid of that. And so that, you know, this 2.1.1 falls on its face. And then it says to promote sustainable development. This is Buttigieg at work again. To promote sustainable development for the benefit of the public by the promotion of sustainable means of achieving economic growth and regeneration. What the fuck does that mean? I mean, that is just weasel language, right? I mean, that means whatever you want it to mean, right? Yeah. We'll get to the definition of sustainable in a second. Then you're going to advance the education of the public. Now, what does advance the education of the public mean? I mean, I look at these scruffies who come out of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton these days, and I think you can argue they have a degree, but did they advance their education by spending 4 years at these institutions? I don't think so. I think they dumbed themselves down.
Well, I was going to say, perhaps it's considered that the public's education is advanced if the members of the government are just dumber.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. And then, you know, you get the sweep around at the end. Such other objects as shall be exclusively charitable by the law of England and Wales, as the trustees shall decide. So this violates American law, in my understanding, because if you're authorized in America for a specific, it can't be a broad set of specific set of purposes, you can't give the latitude to your trustees to do whatever other things they decide to do as the time, you know, as they wake up from their spotted dick lunch. Which is actually a meal. It's almost as bad as bat soup, I guess. Oh. But anyway, so they do us the courtesy of defining sustainable development. Are you ready?
Yes.
It means development which meets the needs of the present without constraining the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I mean, you could read this to say, all right, if I'm running $1 trillion deficit, okay? Eventually, somebody's going to have to pay for that. So anything that I do, you could argue, is going to constrain the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. If you want to use a metric like the deficit, but in debt, but this is, you know, I think a ruse to allow this not charitable organization, in my view, the standing to stand up and say, as Bloomberg is trying to do now, you have these sustainable development goals that you're rated. Your companies now are being rated as to whether or not their activities constitute sustainable development. And if they don't, Mike Bloomberg and others are very happy to say, we've decided that, you know, Crowdsource the Truth is using electricity. You're constraining the needs. You mentioned you upgrade every program. You're buying a new gadget that's fantastic and more bandwidth, and then you're constraining the needs of future generations. You know, off with your head.
All the fiber optic. Well, first of all, chick threads of AK says it's pudding. I think chick threads talking about spotted dick might be pudding.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of food over there. I remember when I first arrived in in England at my junior year, the beginning of my junior year of college. And I'm a finicky eater. I mean, I had spent the preceding summer, I had been in Egypt, and I was jet lagged. I flew through Amsterdam and then direct to Cairo and got off the plane and wasn't, all there. And they said, we'll take you out to lunch. I mean, dinner, the great place. It's the best place that we go to, students. Go around an alley and
Spotted Dick and bat soup.
No, they said this is the food. It was like one of these Jackie Gleason routines. The food, Charles, it's the best thing on the menu. We'll order for you.
Oh,
and I said, well, okay. I said, Charles over here, he's going to have one order of the fool. I said, no, I'm not. No, you've got to have Egyptian fool. It's fantastic. Obviously, that's why I'm not going to have it. But it's actually called fool.
Oh.
But that was a dish. And similarly, I go to this University of London student cafeteria, and I go through.
They definitely have spotted dick.
They had. I thought spotted dick was a sausage, but
we're
sausage.
Hearing that it's pudding, and then Laura Weekly raises the valid question of who would name something spotted dick and then expect people to eat it. Mike Bloomberg. And then another interesting thing, Thomas Tyson is telling us that sustainable has a very specific international definition with regard to the UN and Agenda 2030.
Again, I think they would argue that they might have such a definition, but they're subject to interpretation. And as with anything else, you have, for example, Charity Watch and Charity Navigator and people rating charities but not doing any work. The last thing you want on an amorphous concept where there are not solid metrics, where no one's actually checking carefully to see what happens with these development projects, do you want to allow a supposed charity that's so poorly run, by the evidence that's out there in the public domain, to possibly be in a position to say, oh, you didn't meet sustainable development goals. That means, Crowdsource the truth, we're canceling your credit cards, we're canceling your credit, we're calling your mortgage, you can't travel, we're taking your passport. I mean, that's crazy. And honestly, one of the things we've been doing with this Clinton Foundation project, Jason and me and the others that are involved with us, and thank you to many who are helping, is to really examine not only the Clinton Foundation, but the whole business model for foreign aid. And, I think with that, I remember the first time I encountered one of these books or these consultant reports that come out, typically 300 pages of gibberish written by Buttigieg in his spare time. But they look pretty. They often have a picture of some
glossy printing.
Yeah, they look nice and they're heavy and the paper's good. And they sort of ink smells good.
Looks like it was printed in Germany.
Joe Biden's got a big kiss on the side of it. Whatever. If Joe Biden didn't kiss it, Michael Bloomberg did.
Smelling a little girl.
Exactly. But you look through it and it's got sections and it's got indexes and they've got acknowledgments and they've got definitions and all this kind of stuff. But nowhere in these reports typically do they explain what the fuck happened to the money.
Yeah.
And there has arisen this gigantic industry where, we see it now in the United States of America. It starts with the primaries. Let's go through the charade. Which candidate is the most concerned about climate change out there? Let's have primaries in 50 different states, bringing people out all the way. We can't count the votes on time, of course, because that. Why would we do that?
There's an app for that.
And,
Buttigieg owns it.
Right. Let's get McKinsey on that one. Nobody really knows who voted. If you lose, you claim the Russians influenced it, and then you sick an investigator on it. And
but don't actually investigate.
Right, you don't investigate. Of course, that's what the FBI is not supposed to do.
Allocate some budget to that investigation.
Yeah, that's
go to the bar.
That's what the FBI is supposed to not do. But anyway, you go through this whole charade. We're spending in this country now. We are spending almost $7 trillion. To make it simple, if it were $7.5 trillion, okay, that's $500 million a week.
Oh, wow. Where does that?
Sorry, $500 billion a week. Have I got that right? 52, 700, maybe not, I'm slightly off. But whatever, it's a large amount of money, hundreds of billions per week. Wow. It's just, and no one checks it. When the politicians are called for it, they say, well, if you're a city politician, you say, well, the state didn't give me enough money. If you're a state and city politician, you say it's the federal government's fault. If that doesn't work, you say it's the other party's fault, or you say I have no flexibility on the budget to do anything about it. It's an inherited expense. Don't look at me. And if people say, well, how did you go as Bill Clinton from being, worth negative 14 million to being worth hundreds of millions? Well, what about Mark Zuckerberg? He's a trillionaire. He's worth billions. Why shouldn't I take my taste? So there's this whole industry. They call them in England poverty barons. I don't think Michael Bloomberg is a poverty baron. He's an actual for-profit duke. I mean, he's made a tremendous amount of money. Hats off to him for that. We're going to find out momentarily whether his particular skill set works for him in this debate. And if nothing else, it should be highly amusing to watch. I even might watch it.
I can't. It's been so boring. I've wanted to watch these last few. You turn it on, and it's just like, it's like the worst thing you could imagine.
It's going to be great. You get Biden up there. It's like he'd be falling asleep in Joe, listen, fat.
Yeah.
And then you'd be
I think
looking.
they should just make it like a UFC steel cage fight and just get them all to fight.
I've been trying to get you to do Democrats Got No Talent, but I think you can do the equivalent. We get an English, judge. Biden says something, and Simon Cowell just shreds him.
Oh, wait. Your mention of English has reminded me that it was suggested that you might be confusing spotted dick with head cheese, Charles.
They both sound great, right?
Why wouldn't you eat that? You have that in the bat soup.
That's
Anything
right.
you want on the menu.
We've got it. It's a new weight loss program, right?
Yeah.
First, you send somebody
Dick
to
soup,
India.
Spotted bat, whatever.
No, you send them to India first. They're first for a week. They lose 30 pounds that way. And then you serve them up for a month, charge them 25 times what it really costs, and call yourself a charity.
Yeah, it's excellent. Well, Charles, it's been another great presentation. Congratulations on being the very first Crowdsource the Truth broadcast to go out over fiber optic technology.
Well, thanks for the privilege.
Yeah. And people are saying, one person said there was buffering. The video is now leaving here at 6 megabits per second over a connection that is 890 megabits per second. So there should be no slowdown whatsoever coming from here. The other thing that I'm currently contemplating is having actually 2 separate internet connections so that if there's any kind of problem, it'll fail over to the other one, because a lot of people were speculating that some of the technical problems were coming from outside interference. It's possible. I have no evidence of that. I've been working with computers for 30.
Well, 2 is better than 1, except when it comes to felony counts.
Right. 36 years, something like that. They sometimes don't work in complicated ways, and it's not necessarily somebody trying to frustrate. So we're on a real campaign to smooth out the rough spots. Some of the issues I was dealing with prevented me from putting out the live broadcast of our iTunes podcast now, Charles. But people who are into podcasts, this is something that people have been asking me for literally since I first started Crowdsource the Truth. And I know it's not that complicated, but it's one of these things that you got to kind of wrap your head around. And until you do that, if you don't know, you don't know. But people who are into podcasts can now listen to Sunday with Charles, and Charles Ortel is closing in on iTunes, on Spotify, on Spreaker. But we're there on the podcasts. And basically, it's another way for people to enjoy the show and learn all about the enormous criminal activity of the Clintons and their associates.
Sounds like a plan, Jason. Congratulations. And I know people can support your show.
Yes, thank you for reminding me, Charles. All of these upgrades, even though people want the information to be free and they want to complain if anything at all goes wrong with the broadcast, there are some people out there who are very upset that I would have the audacity to want to work 16, 18 hours a day producing content for people to watch and earn money doing that. Some people think that's crazy. But I do want to ask the people who are watching, if you've been watching Sunday with Charles, if you've been enjoying all the shows on Crowdsource the Truth, the free shows on YouTube, on Periscope, on Facebook, on DLive, on VK.com. If you're not yet a sponsor, please become one. I can't keep the show going without your sponsorship. If you go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You can sponsor the show for as little as $2 a month, and you're going to enjoy a huge library of exclusive content. You know, unfortunately, Lee Stranahan is back in the hospital. I've been trying to contact him yesterday and today, and haven't heard from him. So there's not going to be a high dive episode tonight, but we hope that Lee is getting better, and hopefully he'll be back next week. And I want to thank everybody who is sponsoring the show. I want to thank everybody who's watching the show. If $2 a month is too rich, you can for free email an episode to somebody you know, post it on your social media, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Crowdsource the Truth 2 on YouTube or the Jason Goodman channel, and we'll see everybody on Sunday. Thanks for watching.